this transition has been not of your choice and has been an interesting time. And so we hope that some of the things that we talk about today will be helpful. I'm Michelle Bartlett. I'm faculty at NC State, and I'm a faculty scholar at the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research. And Carol?
It would help if I unmuted myself. Welcome, everyone. I'm Carol Warren. I'm faculty with NC State, and I'm also a faculty scholar with the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research. And prior to my role at NC State, I spent about 16 years working in a couple of North Carolina's community colleges. So I welcome you, and we are here for you.
All right, well, we'll get started.
All right, well, our session today covers really three things, and we will discuss ways that you can communicate with your students through asynchronous methods, how you can connect with them directly through communication tools and shortcuts to provide feedback on assignments, and ways to reach out to your students with synchronous options as well. Let's get started with ways to communicate asynchronously. We all know how to use email, but what is it that we can do to effectively and efficiently reach out to students? Sometimes just a quick email message where you blind copy all of your students and say, hey, are you all okay? If you need to talk or join a Zoom call or a session with me on the phone, those are good ways to check in with your students right now. Offer several times and dates where you will be available for them to just check in. This creates a space for them to share their concerns and provides you with an opportunity to provide reassurance and supportive campus resources, connecting them if they need support. Recently, I had a student who missed 2 appointments with me by phone, and I knew, it was not like that student, and I was really concerned. So I texted them to just check in. And what I learned later on in our conversation when we had one was that student had been caring for a sick family member. They had 2 kids home from college and 3 smaller ones that they were homeschooling, all while their workload at work had doubled and they were working from home. And so our conversation at that moment was not about class or assignments that were in the class at all, but it was more about just giving that student the space to share what they had been experiencing and to provide support and an outlet. Another example of a way to connect is to send out a short newsletter with class updates. I use a tool called smore.com to send out class updates, and generally I use this tool early, maybe like a week before classes get started, and send out a welcome note to my classes. But another way that you can reach students during this time is to use it just to send general updates, assignment changes, the best way to get in contact with you. And that is smore.com is smore.com, and it's user-friendly and it's free. And they have even created a Corona template center where in less than 15 minutes, you can use that template to create a newsletter in a form that they have pre-formatted and communicate with your students any updates and any tools that might be helpful for them as they try to navigate through the completion of this semester. Students can also engage in that platform by liking your message, and that lets you know that they've been able to see it. Also, another way to check in on your students is if you are using a learning management system, check to see when the last time they logged in was. I've provided here an example of my Moodle class, and the first step is when I log into Moodle, I can click on those 3 lines at the top left of my screen and click participants in that drop down list. And then it takes me to a list of all of my students. And I see when the last time they logged in was into the class. And so see, I've highlighted a couple of students, and it had been, several days, more than a couple weeks. And I was able to reach out to those students and just say, hey, I noticed it's been a while. I know things are hectic right now in the world. And how are you? And is there anything I can do to help support you getting through the class successfully? And when I did that, one student responded, and they shared with me that they were thinking about dropping the class, but now, given the flexibility I had offered, that they felt like they'd be able to finish. And that made me happy. And, now is, of course, the time to be more flexible than ever.
So this is a screenshot of a Moodle classroom. So your LMS may look different, but however, most LMSs will have an announcements feature that you can use to communicate with your students for a variety of things. So I'll usually send an announcement at the beginning of the week or the beginning of a module and just say, hey, here are the expectations, just as a reminder. And sometimes the class schedule can be a little overwhelming in an online format. They see the whole mountain to climb, right? So the weekly announcement or the module based announcement is really to say, just focus on this part of the mountain that we're climbing, and just reminders of due dates. Announcements can also be sent to summarize your thoughts on grading or thoughts on discussion forums. So if you're watching a discussion forum and they were all hitting some really good points, but maybe they missed out as a collective whole discussion, they missed out some good left out some good points, you can use an announcement to say, hey, I enjoyed reading all of your discussions and interactions this week. Here are some other things to think about, and just kind of add on to their knowledge from that discussion forum. Also for grading, if I see that a lot of students are having the same kind of issue, maybe they're having trouble formatting their title page in the appropriate MLA or APA format, then I might use an announcement to say, your grades for assignment 3 are in, and here are some helpful resources that will help you navigate some of the feedback you got, and maybe send them a link to an MLA or an APA formatting sample or something like that. You can also pre-schedule announcements to go out at specific dates and times. So this is really good if you know that you'll be busy. So if you know, on Monday, I'm going to be grading all day and I'm not going to really have a presence in my online classroom, you can set out an announcement to go out Monday morning to say, hey, thinking of you, here's a great article, or here's a great TED Talk or video or whatever on the content that we're talking about this week. And it kind of feels like you're checking in on a day when really you're focusing on another part of your work, right? Grading or something else. Moving on. So the other thing that's really helpful is to have a course cafe. So this is just a discussion forum that I usually make in the course. So this isn't something that comes populated in the course already, like the announcements. And this is really a place for the students to talk more casually. They might share examples of, a new resume template or a job opportunity that they've just got an interview for and they're excited, or pictures of their cat, or anything that helps kind of build this sense of community in the course. But it's also really important to note that you don't want them to talk about their grades or any personal issues in this type of public forum. And so having a note there, letting them know, hey, if you're concerned about a grade that you got, email me, right? Let's talk more privately about that. Also, recording lectures. So this is kind of a screenshot of Screencast-O-Matic, and we have a video. I don't have chat enabled right now, so we can share. We have your emails. We can share out this PowerPoint, and I'll also share out a file. It's a short video on how to create a Screencast-O-Matic, and it's just a screen capturing service where you have your PowerPoint open on your desk, and when you launch the screen recording, and it's free, you drag those black and white dotted lines in to cover only what you want to see. So you might have your notes off to the right, that your script or whatever you're going to say, and it's just capturing the PowerPoint slide. Or you can set it to record your webcam, like so you actually talking and lecturing, or both. So it would have a picture of your PowerPoint with a little picture of your webcam off, on the side, where they can see both the PowerPoint and watching you talk. Screencast-O-Matic is free up to 15 minutes. It is extremely easy to use. You can edit it. So if you pause after every slide, so when you click that red record button, if you then click pause when you're done talking, move your slide over, then hit record again, it'll give you the 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then talk, and it doesn't sound choppy. It will sound smooth, but the really cool benefit of pausing after every PowerPoint is that if you make a mistake, you can actually just click this back button and it will go back to the beginning of since the last time you paused. So you're really just starting over for that slide rather than starting over for the whole presentation. You can also add closed captioning for free, and it's really easy to do. We would be happy to walk you through it. We have some resources at the end of this presentation of how to get a hold of us for kind of some one-on-one help. You can add closed captioning very easily, and some background music if you want to make it snazzy. So recording your lectures is another good way to keep in contact with your students and cover things that maybe they wouldn't have gotten just from the readings or the course content, right? So if you're teaching, project management and the textbook talks about scope creep, they will know how to define it. They will understand that it's bad, but they won't maybe know what to do if it happens. And if you're an expert and you've had experience, and then you can share things beyond just what they're learning in the textbook. So, and you just embed this right into your classroom.
Michelle, before I get started on this slide, I know you've done this in Screencast-O-Matic, but I have as well. I've used it to pull up their assignments and papers and record my feedback vocally as well.
Yep.
All right. So, on these days, I like to try to have a little bit of humor. And I don't know if you've heard of the slogan, "It takes a licking and keeps on ticking." But in the 50s, the Timex company had that slogan about their watches. And it was really meant to be an indicator that the watches were tough, had endurance, and the capacity to withstand stress and damage, but still allow the watch to function. So don't you sort of feel like we can all identify with that phrase right now, given the current climate? We're trying to be resilient and tough and endure the circumstances. So I want to share an example with you of one way we can keep ticking despite our current circumstance. Midterm evaluations provide an outlet for your students to give their feedback to you before the semester ends. And while most of our colleges and universities are past that midterm point, you could still use this resource to check in with your students. What I use this for, and I sent out prior to our midterm at NC State, is I created a Google form, which was a brief 5-question survey that I sent out to my students. And you can also use surveymonkey.com, which is a free tool. And both are user-friendly. And I would ask my students some questions like, how are things going for you? And they can select a number between one to five on a Likert scale that gives you an indicator of how they're feeling. Um, if they need campus resources, that might be another question that you ask them, and give a yes no option, and then you know who to reach out to if they are in need of some support beyond what they're getting. Give additional space for them to express or share their concerns with what they might be experiencing at the moment. And when you create the form in Google Forms as well as SurveyMonkey, it creates a link that you can just share. And when students respond, you can download their answers into an Excel spreadsheet. It gives students just a chance to share what they're feeling. And then it also, if you are teaching, it alleviates the frustrations they would express on a final term evaluation.
Yeah, and one more thing to add is, and I'm sorry if you already covered this, Carol, I had to mute and go handle my Alexa because she started listening to you and thinking you were talking to her. So sorry if you already mentioned this point, but what's really helpful is that the students feel heard, because if they give you feedback at the end of the semester, you can only apply it to the next semester, right? So kind of checking in with them, even if it's not at the midpoint, it really gives you an opportunity to adjust, and they know you're listening. And so that's really helpful. So let's talk a little bit about communicating with students directly. One thing that's really important when you're teaching online is giving the information that students need to know how to contact you, how to reach you. And, you know, they're no longer able to just come up to you after class. And so they often will feel like they're on this island just doing this course by themselves. And to really make sure that they have that connection with you, it's really good to set this tone that the students are able to reach you, and let them know how do you like to be reached. And everybody is different, and that's okay. So if you prefer email, let them know. If you prefer that they put a certain class in the subject line so you know the context of their question, let them know that. So you just really want to be really clear about how they can reach you so that they don't wait until they're so frustrated that they're ready to drop the course, or they're really freaking out before they can finally get a hold of you. So being proactive and letting them know how to contact you before they have a complete meltdown.
Yes, and I would just add, Michelle, that when you think about teaching or leading classes and instruction in person, so often we think about, oh, what will appeal to my visual learners or what will appeal to my kinesthetic learners. But in this situation, I think we need to think about how people prefer to communicate. So while some people prefer text or voice or email, you know, those are different methods. And so giving your students options to connect different ways that might accommodate what they're comfortable with will be helpful as well.
And then incorporating an idea that a participant talked about in a previous webinar that we were hosting. You can create a Google Voice number so that you're not giving your own phone number out to your students, and then have it forwarded to your cell phone. So it would still ring on your cell phone, but they don't really have your personal cell phone number. So if that works for you, that's an option. One word of caution is to check to make sure that your number that you select doesn't form some sort of word that's inappropriate. And I only say that because when I was looking for screenshots to put in here, I was like, oh, here's a great screenshot, and then noticed in the fine print some things that were not as appropriate. And I hadn't really thought about that when making a Google Voice. So wanted to kind of pass along that information to you guys.
Yes, and remind.com is a great tool too. If you have used that, that will allow you to text your courses and set it up, and it's also free and user friendly. So when your students need help and you can't see their faces, look for other warning signs that they might be in distress. And I know I mentioned earlier about, checking your Moodle to see when the last time they logged in was. So that's one way. Other ways that you can be supportive during this time to your students is be familiar with your campus's resources. What is still available at your institution that may be something you can pass on to the students? Is there a way that you can maybe work with the counseling center, if you have one at your institution, to put a list together for that's relevant with community and campus resources? Some resources that I have come across with that's public and would be helpful to students experiencing mental stressors or even potentially abusive situations include something called Talkspace, which is a virtual therapy platform. It meets HIPAA and privacy laws, and they're currently offering discounts to people in need of services. So, and again, that's talkspace.com. As we move forward and continue to talk about ways to connect with your students, it's also at the same time you're offering all these options, right? It's also important that you set clear boundaries of when and how you will respond. So create a schedule for your responses. So when you communicate to your students, let them know that your typical time frame for returning responses via email or text or call or whatever it is 48 hours, or whatever you feel is reasonable for you and what you're experiencing too right now. Then if you contact them sooner than that, they'll be excited rather than disappointed if you contact them later. You could also include your availability times and ways to connect with you in your email signature, or in a statement that you include on your Moodle page or on the newsletter, that tool that I talked about earlier, or even automatic reply to the email that says, hey, thank you for connecting with me. I will be responding to emails within 2 days, and here's when I'll be available by phone. And set yourself some office hours, 9 to 11, Mondays and Wednesdays, for example. So those are some other ways that you can sort of establish that connection with students, which is really important, but also give yourself that time that you're going to need at home as well.
And a great tool for managing emails and during non-office hours. So if with your work-life balance, the best thing for you to do is to check emails at midnight, then, and some people might not want to have emails sent to them at midnight, especially if you have some sort of a power position over them. They might feel the need to respond right away. You can always, if you use Gmail, there's that send later, but if you don't, there are apps like Boomerang. Obviously check with your institution to make sure their IT department is okay with you using such tools, but there are free tools that will help you to send an email later. So you can write it at midnight and it will send at 8 a.m. the next day.
All right, so work-life balance is what this slide is about. And has it really been creeping into your mind at all lately? I know it has for me. So we're all really adjusting to new situations as we adapt our normal routines and find new ways to live, work, and service caretakers, homeschool children, all simultaneously, right? So if you find yourself working into the night, how are you dividing the time when work ends and family time begins? It does start to get blurry. It's important to try to do your best to set a time frame when you're not working. So for example, I might try to set aside 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. when I'm not working every day. And during those hours, I focus on taking care of things in my home, cooking dinner for my family, or taking a break just from what the workday has brought. And I'll just share an example that sometimes at 5 o'clock, and I know this happened to me last week, I feel that things related to work, my tasks related to work, are so urgent that they need to be taken care of then. And so I'll find myself working till 8 or 9, 10, 11 o'clock, which is really, when you think about it, not reasonable. So what I've tried to be more vigilant about is leaving it at 5, trying to stick to that regimen. And then, when you leave it and you start the time with your family and start sort of breaking away from the work, you may realize that those things that you thought were so urgent are not quite so urgent after all. And just, remember self-care and those boundaries that we just talked about.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about communicating with your students through their assignments. So first, discussion boards. It's really important to decide on the topic of the discussion board. Is it best for these students that you're responding to every single post? Is it better if you're sitting back and kind of letting this synergy and conversation kind of happen organically, and then maybe you send out a recap through the announcements at the end of the discussion board? And every topic is different. So like, for example, in courses that I teach, when students are first learning, when I teach research methods, and when they're first learning how to formulate a research question, it's really more of a need for me to be hands-on and responding to every single post and not asking for peer responses, because we don't need the people who are learning as well trying to give feedback to the others that are learning, right? Whereas in a different course that I teach, they might have a case study that they read, and then they're all talking together about how they would solve this problem. In that case, I kind of usually will stay back out of the conversations. I'm reading them, and then at the end of the discussion board, I'll send out an announcement saying, enjoyed, reading your discussion about such and such case. Here are some great points that were made. Students like to know that you took notice of what they contributed to the discussion. So there's really no right or wrong best practice of one specific way that you should facilitate a discussion board in your class. It's really up to you to decide what is best for the students given the topic. I also use discussion boards for debates. So I'll put a controversial topic up, split the class into two. They don't get to pick which side they're on, and then they have to debate their side. And so that is obviously a time when I would stay back until the end. So discussion boards are a good time for you to interject things that they might not have thought about and to springboard the conversation. So if they're just scratching the surface about something, sometimes you can post a question or a piece of content that will get them thinking deeper about the topic, so that you can kind of steer the discussion without being that kind of sage on the stage, the boss is in the room kind of feel in the discussion forum, but instead you're kind of leading with them and prompting them and pushing them to think deeper. So the other way is through their assignments. There's so many different ways. The assignment is not just a one-shot, snapshot, judgment day. Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? The whole goal of the assignment is to check in on learning. Are they learning what you need, right? So when you're marking things incorrect, it's a really good time to give that extra learning piece of, here's, it really appears that you're struggling with concept A. Here's some extra resources for that. And it may not even be on every individual paper. It might be one collective thing at the end on the announcements. Another fun thing for interacting with your students is using the screencast-o-matic that Carol was talking about earlier, where you can actually, I've used this where with say a paper, say the student's writing a paper on a topic, and I've kind of marked it up a little bit with track changes or with whatever, and then I will use screencast-o-matic and make just a quick, just 1 to 2 minute video file that I send to the students where I address them by name. Hey, Susie, great paper. Here's some, I really like how you did, and, show the strength. This part over here where, I prompted you to dig deeper. Here's some things I was kind of wanting you to think about. So you will, there's been research done on this where faculty will give deeper feedback when they're talking in a video versus when you have to type it out, and you have to type it out to 30, 60, 90 more students, right? So it's quicker, and yet the students feel like they got better feedback and they feel more connected to you at the same time. And I promise you, it's quicker than it sounds. It's it really, once you get into the groove of it, making the little files and sending it to them is pretty quick. And so that's a way to help them feel connected, especially if you're having to give them negative feedback. Sometimes hearing your tone of voice sets a different tone that you're really trying to help them rather than a judgment move. And then also, Carol, did you want to share about using, I think it was Notability
Um,
or?
well, I don't know that you talked about this, but I know it's something that you do where you um, write up like to save yourself time, but also provide valuable feedback. You type up like responses in a Word document and then copy and paste them over.
Yeah, if I find that students, a lot of students are having the same issue, like say they didn't format the title page correctly, and I want to send them to Owl Purdue's website on APA, I'll type up a comment and then I can just cut and paste it over to the students that need it. But there's also a way to use Notability on an iPad where you actually can open their paper and write. You can annotate with a pencil versus like track changes. I have a colleague that uses that. He really likes that. I've not done it.
And I'll add to this, I just came across this resource yesterday, but there is a website offering free note-taking services for students with disabilities. But if you think about universal design learning, you could really offer that to all of your students, and that was through glean.com, and that is GLEAN.com. So if they are needing support with note-taking services, that is one way to get some support for them.
All right, so moving on to communicating with students synchronously.
Yes, so we talked a little bit about how to structure your office hours, but there are tools to help you manage those hours. So one tool that comes to mind and is very helpful and free is Calendly.com, which is CALENDLY.com, and it connects to your calendar, and then you set like the days and times that you're available, and then you place that link to Calendly in your email signature or a newsletter, or whatever method you are communicating with your students, and they can sign up for times that you're available during that time frame. And so if other students sign up, it will mark out those hours and only show available times, which is another great way to connect and offer that space that they might need.
Another great thing, I love Calendly, and the best thing about it is not only does it sync to your email and go straight, into your Google Calendar and go straight to your calendar, but it will also email you when someone has signed up. And then also you can set the hours. So I might say, sign up for an online office hour Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 9 to 11 a.m. And then they can only sign up for those times. It doesn't give them full access to any free space on your calendar, only within those bounds that you've set. And then once, if you have a meeting that pops up at 10, they will no longer have that choice because it's in that 9 to 11 space that the boundary that you've set. So it's a pretty smart tool, and it's nice because students can see, okay, they're only available on Monday this week, but Tuesday they have an opening Tuesday next week. So it's really helpful. One fun thing that I've done with students to communicate with them and interact with them is a coffee and conversation. And so it'll be about some sort of reading they've had in the class. Like for instance, for this, it was a whole book, but it doesn't always have to be. It can be just, reading. We read chapters 2 through 4 of whatever textbook. Let's talk about it. And I invite them to get online, grab a hot beverage. Let's talk about this reading that we've had. And I like this because quizzes, we have a lot of quizzes in education, and we're really quiz heavy when it's checking in if they've read the content or if they have memorized and retained the content. So they read chapter 2, they take a quiz on chapter 2. Then they read chapter 3 and they take a quiz on chapter 3. And what I really like about these coffee and conversations is that it's really mindful of focusing on that the learning took place and not about the judgment taking place. So if I assign readings, and I can have a top-notch student who always goes above and beyond and does all the reading. Something happened, a big life event happens in their life. They're not able to do the reading that week. I can punish them with an F on a quiz because they didn't do the reading. Or we could have a group coffee and conversation, and yeah, they didn't do the reading that week, but their peers that did can help have a conversation facilitated by me that makes sure that that learning happens for all the students. Even if they weren't able to do their reading that week, they still were able to learn the content they needed, which is more important than the fairness of an F because you didn't read, right? So I really love having these coffee and conversations. And then they also, so let's just say we, waved a magic wand and 100% of them did the reading. They're learning from their peers in a way and taking more away from that specific chapter than they would just by reading it themselves, right? So any time that you want them to critically think about a topic in the course, these coffee and conversations are really, really helpful. Also, when you're teaching face-to-face, you might have an expert in the field come in and do a guest lecture. Well, you can do that online as well. So you can invite the experts into your classroom via Zoom or whatever web conferencing system you use, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, whatever, and you can invite them in, and with their permission, you could even maybe record it so that you can use it for future classes. Even classes that you're teaching face-to-face, you can send them the link to the recording, or you could play it in class. So that is a knowledge from an expert captured that can be used again and again, whether you're teaching online next semester or you've shifted back to face-to-face.
So another way to, meet with your students live or in real time is just to reach out, give them a tour via Google Hangouts or Zoom. They can connect with you that way, and asynchronously as well. One thing that I do in my classes, and I let students know ahead of time that I'm doing this, that I have a question and answer for them. And anytime I get a question from a student, it's 9 times out of 10, they're not going to post it to that forum. They're going to email me and say, hey, I didn't want to post this to the forum, but, and they ask their question. And so I let them know up front that I'll be posting questions anonymously to that board. So what I'll do occasionally throughout the course is I will post the question that I got in my email, obviously leave off the student's name, and I may rephrase it, and I may think about even adding to that question some things that I can include to help clarify. So it'll just be a short Q&A post, and I have learned that that's helpful to not only resolve that student's question, but also to eliminate potential questions that students may have that were similar that they may not have reached out to ask.
I've also used asynchronous short videos to give tours of templates. So if I have a template of a PowerPoint presentation or a template of a big, huge final term paper, sometimes things that look super clear to me, because I've taught this class over and over, are not as clear to the students. So if I get a question, what do you really mean by this in the template? I'll usually just use Screencast-O-Matic again, and I will record a screenshot of the template and just walk them through it. So this heading, these are the kind of things I want talked about in this section. For this heading, these are the kind of things that would be really helpful, and don't forget this, and please remember this. And it's a good time to just kind of walk through the template. And I record that and I send it out through announcements, so it goes to their emails, and then I'll also embed it in the course. And when I embed it in the course, that means that when I course copy that shell over next semester, that helpful tool is there, because the announcements don't carry over. I also like to use short videos synchronously when I have people together. So maybe we're on a Zoom session that's not being recorded, and someone says, how do I access the online library? Great question. Let's go on a field trip. I'll share my screen. I'll start recording. I'll show them how to get access the online library at NC State. I'll show them some, tips and tricks and ways to get a hold of the librarian through chat, whatever I feel like they need to know. Stop the recording, and then post that in the class for those who couldn't attend. And they don't have to watch the whole hour per se, but they can watch that short video on how to access the online library. Well, we hope that we talked about some things that got your brain thinking. If you do any cool stuff that we left out that you would want shared out to people, because we're all in this together, email us, let us know. If you need any help, we have a needs request link here, go.ncsu.edu/needs request, where you can request short videos being made, large group Zoom session ideas, one-on-one coaching that you might need. If you want a short video made on how to embed something into your course, or how to rearrange your gradebook in an online classroom to be efficient, or any kind of question, big or small, go to that Google form and let us know, and we'll help you out. If you would like some Zoom time with one of our coaches, we have a new link. It was actually created today, I believe. So go.ncsu.edu/cc coaching. And you can schedule a time to meet with one of our awesome coaches to talk about whatever issues you might be having, because we are definitely all in this together, and we really want to help you guys feel comfortable in the online space, whether it's course design, setting up the class, whether it's online facilitation and how to interact with your students and be impactful. If it's assessment, advising, whatever, we want to be here for you. So hopefully,
Absolutely.
hopefully you got something out of this session, and we hope to continue interacting with you.
Yes. And we will be hosting more sessions in the coming weeks. Our focus next week will be on e-advising. So hopefully your institutions will continue to share this information out. And it has been a pleasure sharing time with you this morning.